のかの夜空を行く待ちに待った思いを胸に星の長い今夜だけは止まれ織姫に会いに行く麗しの君よ変わられて見たことない着物黄金色の髪去年まで無口だったあなたは今年は落ちるならば一年ぶり君は変わないね驚いた僕の顔を見て笑うつつましやかだったあなたはどこにいてしまわれたのでしょう
Alrighty, welcome back to Mangaka Americana, and today we will be covering Civil War Wolverine. Alright, so for those of you who don't know, you got basically two types of Marvel fans. You have the hardcore audience, also known as the true believers, as Stan Lee would call them. You also have the casual audience. The casual audience, basically they've watched the movies, they've played a few games, they've watched the shows, but they don't know the in-depth lore for the most part of the books. And for the movies, I would say for the most part, the adaptations have actually been pretty good, especially with the adaptation of the Infinity Gauntlet story, which we got as Infinity War and Endgame. But one adaptation I did not care about too much, or did not care for too much, and found really disappointing was Captain America Civil War. Civil War was a universe-wide event, and basically they just condensed it down into a Captain America movie, which I felt was really lazy. It felt like Disney was just trying to get a third Captain America movie in there with Chris Evans, and it was not Civil War. Because if you ever talk to anyone who reads the books, or let's say you're watching a YouTuber like Comics Explained or Comic Storian, you would know that the book is way different. Essentially, okay, so the premise of Civil War, the base story, is that for the longest time, for years and years and years, you'd have, supervillains or national disasters or just petty crooks or whatever, doing their thing, being bad guys. And of course, superheroes would show up and stop these guys. And most of these superheroes were not being paid. Now, technically, in a way, they weren't legal. However, they often cause more good than harm, and in the perspective of the authorities and the government, it's like, hey, these guys are pretty much doing our jobs for us, and a lot of these supervillains we have no way of actually taking down. And so basically it's like, hey, we're just going to turn a blind eye to it, maybe work with them a little bit. But then eventually legislation starts going around Congress, something called the Superhuman Registration. Or, if they're a mutant, if they're a superhuman, a mutate, mystic, hell, even if they didn't have any powers ever, let's just say they were, an average human being, but just were they too would have to register with the government. As far as registries go, anytime a government tries to create a registry for a specific group of people, it never goes good, and usually backfires. The Germans did it with the Jews during, the 30s and 40s, which we ended up getting the Holocaust after that, or out of that. You have the Armenian Genocide, which is another good example. You have the Sex Offender Registry here in the United States, which has only done more harm than good and has done nothing to protect people. It's actually just made things worse. And the Superhuman Registration Act was no different. Basically they had to register their real identities with the government, which, it's not a big deal, whatever. Well, yeah, realize a big part of the reason why these heroes have secret identities is because if that information gets out, like who they really are, their family could be targeted. We can trust the government because, the government isn't corrupt. The government, as we know, never gets information leaked. Trust the government. I'm the government and I'm here to help you. Okay. And so you had, of course, they would always say, oh, it's for safety and security, for a safe and secure society. We're giving accountability to superheroes. Okay, but here's the thing. What you're really doing is basically creating a super police force. Uh, which, that was one of the problems, is that basically they would tell the heroes who the bad guys were, which is just not good. You can obviously see all the problems with that. And the general public, while some of them bought into the hype, like they do with a lot of registries, there's a lot of people in the general public there's like, no, that's a terrible idea. The superhuman community was split down the middle as well. With the heroes, a lot of them were like, yeah, it's accountable. Have the government help us more. Where a lot of the superheroes would say, no, this is a clear scam. This is a huge mistake if we do this going forward. It's going to bite everybody in the ass. Even supervillains were, on the fence about it. A lot of them would say, oh, it's a good thing because I'm going to manipulate the system, which a lot of them did. Of course, you had a lot of them who were like, yeah, I'm a criminal, okay, man, I'm a crook. I make my money illegally. I don't want to register with the government. That's the last thing I want to do. And so it was just a huge fiasco. One of the best stories Marvel has ever produced, to be honest. But today, like I said, we are covering Marvel Comics Civil War Wolverine. This is basically what Wolverine was doing during this time, because Civil War, really, you had a few events that came before. You had Avengers Disassembled, which, the Avengers broke up, Avengers Mansion was destroyed or whatever. Then you had the new Avengers that ended up forming. And then eventually you had House of M, which the Scarlet Witch removed most of the mutant population's powers. And so, once that happened, there was only a government estimate of 198 mutants left on the planet. And so most of them were living at the Xavier Institute, the home of the X-Men. And so they were pretty much on the registry anyways. And so most X-Men really wanted to stay out of it. But of course, this is a Wolverine story, so that's not how that went. So let's see. Oh, right. Okay, so it really starts. Wolverine is narrating this entire story. It seems like he's just in a monologue, but he's actually, for the most part, you'll see in the end. It says, people call me Wolverine. I'm the best there is at what I do, and what I do best is this. And basically, you got some dude called the Crusader. He's got like all these guys dressed up like they're from the Middle Ages, and they've hijacked a plane, and they're like gonna crash it into like superhero bases. Wolverine's not having any of this. This dude's trying to quote all kinds of scripture and religious nonsense. Of course, Wolverine, takes one of his eyes out, crashes the plane, burns a bunch of corn. A few hours later, he heals up. He goes to get a drink because, that's Wolverine. And he's getting he's got a little beep going on, right? You see like this Avengers logo on one of his gloves. The lady's like, oh man, wow, you're so busy. You must be a doctor. What kind? He goes, a surgeon. Of course, as you know, it's a joke because surgeons cut people open, and Wolverine cuts open a lot of people. Well, he gets another beep. It's on his other glove, and it's from the X-Men. Okay, so he looks on the TV, you see breaking news. And basically, you see a town called Stanford, Connecticut, and Stanford blows up. We later learned that it was actually the villain Nitro who blew himself up and killed a bunch of people. And this was on live television. And because of this, I think it's like 600 people died, including 60 children. And this was really the final push for the Superhuman Registration Act to go into law. And of course, you have somebody talking to somebody, right? Some guys in the shadows, someone's calling him his liege. So, you got some royalty stuff going on. Of course, we're at Stanford, and Wolverine's narrating. Because nobody talks, not for 3 hours or so. It's all most can do to keep their lunch down. Raquel doesn't quite manage. Some chick throws up. When the talking starts, Iron Man says, I heard they've got a lead on Nitro. Word is he sneaked out of town in the back of a pickup truck. Wolverine, the first words spoken are about punishment. But who ultimately gets punished, who gets blamed, who gets made the scapegoat. That's going to change with time. And not much time at that. because you got Sentinels, watching over Wolverine. Granted, these are man Sentinels; they're not autonomous like your classic Sentinels. And he's like, "We volunteered to help with a federal emergency, and you're still following us around, only doing our jobs, Wolverine." Which is a little bit of a commentary as far as like things like parole and probation, to where a lot of times in the U.S. people will get out of prison and they'll have parole officers. And some of them are really just there to make sure these people integrate. A lot of parole officers are there just to lock people back up because a lot of these people have investments which makes money. So yeah, if you're overseas and you're watching this, little fun fact: America has 5% of the world's population, and yet we have 25% of all of its prisoners. Prison here makes a lot of money. Do not move here if you do not have to. But there's also the fact that a lot of times, in some states, they'll pass laws, seemingly for quote unquote good reasons, that will violate people's rights, to where people will serve out the entirety of their sentence and yet they'll still be put on parole, which is actually illegal and very unconstitutional. But a lot of people are straight up pussies and don't try to fight it, or they don't try to fight things like that and take it to the Supreme Court. And a lot of times when people do try to take it to the Supreme Court, the paperwork goes missing, quote unquote. But anyways, enough about American politics and how they fucking suck. So Wolverine's back in New York, right? And he's like eating at this Japanese restaurant. Of course, the owner asks him to leave. They know each other, right? They've been cool for a while because superheroes aren't looking too good because of Stanford, Connecticut, and that whole explosions thing. So he goes out the back. You got all these dudes there who worked at the restaurant, like they're gonna do something. One couple of them got knives. One guy's got a nunchuck or whatever because he's vaguely Oriental. He's like, "Look, man, I'm a former Canadian soldier, former secret agent, former SHIELD agent, current X-Man, and Avenger. Plus, there's the adamant skin. And these pops his claws out. Yeah, these guys are stuck off. How like anger makes people stupid. But the Baxter Building, right? A couple days later, you get all these superheroes here. You got the Thing, you got She-Hulk, Wolverine, Luke Cage, Spider-Man. Everybody's there. You got losers like Nighthawk, because who cares about him? And so they're talking, right? You got the Falcon, Sam Wilson. I can't believe I'm hearing this. The Mask, our tradition. We can't just let them strip away our rights. Yellow Jacket, Hank Pym, because he's always been the most stable people. I'm being sarcastic, of course. Are you kidding? We're lucky people have tolerated this for as long as they have, Sam. Why should we be allowed to hide behind these things? Wolverine says, because the world ain't so nice outside your ivory tower, bub. The Thing, Ben Grimm, tell me about it, Stumpy. You think Johnny would have ended up in a hospital last night if morons like you wasn't out there giving us a bad name? I don't know. Shield says because the Human Torch actually got beat up and put in the hospital. Because it's really, I think this story's like early 2000s. So really this is a little bit of commentary on 9/11. Because basically 9/11, in case for those of you who are too young to remember or whatever, you had some terrorists hijack some planes. They drove into the Twin Towers, the World Trade Center, blew it up. Did some other stuff too. It's for all this other stuff. Because Christian groups, as we know, don't terrorist actions. That never happens, especially here in America. But essentially, you had a bunch of xenophobia, just blow up for about 10 years, to where if you were Muslim, if you were Middle Eastern, if you're Arabic, anything of the sort, you were automatically labeled as terrorist. And that's basically what happened to the Human Torch. You had Stanford, Connecticut, which, Nitro blew himself up. The New Warriors were involved because they were hunting him down. And because Johnny Storm, the Human Torch, is a superhero, he's just like the others. We should just go ahead and beat him up, even though he's done nothing wrong. And again, around the time of 9/11 or post 9/11, you saw a lot of that with Muslims here in the U.S. So a bit of interesting commentary. So basically, you get Iron Man talking to Wolverine. Iron Man says, SHIELD says they're running point on the Nitro manhunt, but they haven't exactly been sharing their intel. Wolverine says, it's been days. If they were going to catch him, they'd caught him. Guys in the wind. Kills hundreds. Kills kids. And they let him go. Logan, or let it go, Logan. We've got enough problems without one of us going on a vendetta. Whatever you say, boss. Okay, let's see now. And that is there's something called the First 48. Yes, there's a show called it, but the reason why it's called the First 48 is because statistically speaking, if let's say you have somebody who commits a homicide, statistically speaking, if you do not catch them within the first 48 hours, chances are you're not going to. And that's basically what Wolverine's saying. He's like, man, if they would have caught him by now, they would have. You got Luke Cage come up, hey, Stumpy, not in the mood, Cage. I could tell. What do you mean by that back there? About the world not being so nice as we think? Because, again, this is they're at the Baxter Building right now, but Stark Tower, also known as Avengers Tower, is where the new Avengers are living, which, Luke Cage and Wolverine are part of at this point in time. Wolverine says, I mean, the world's got problems, and giving out a driver's license ain't gonna fix them. Basically, he's talking about the Superhuman Registration Act. Yeah, except I'm not so sure I see the harm. Like you said, we're already registering to drive around. What's the difference if some of us fly? Because there's registration and there's registration. A few decades actually, I had some friends back in Germany had registration didn't work out too well for them. I think there's a difference between our government and the Nazis. Right about that. Our government should know better. Of course, this goes to show, or it goes to more commentary to where how the U.S. will sit here and talk about fighting for freedom, truth, and justice, and all that, and how everyone else is the bad guy. Yet, over the decades, we've actually started becoming more and more authoritarian. And again, it goes back to the whole, well, we're going to take away your freedoms. The freedoms we talk about, freedom, 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 for safety and security. Of course, the Germans did it way back during World War II. The difference is they did it way too quick. America, or the American government specifically, has been doing it for years, but they've been doing it slowly, subtly. And that's really what, this whole conversation is about. Luke Cage says, you're really going to compare us superheroes to German Jews? All I know is there's a sentinel camped out on the front lawn of Xavier's, and he ain't there to sell Girl Scouts or Girl Scout cookies. Sorry, he's there for your protection. And what if that sentinel on the front lawn was burning a cross? Excuse me? Because that's what a sentinel is to mutant, bub. A burning cross, a symbol of oppression, of bigotry. I need a beer. Okay. And of course, he's not exactly wrong, because for years, before they became, piloted by people, were designed to angle mutants. And Spring, is at the Xavier Institute right now. This is, a couple days later. He's talking to Emma Frost. He's talking to Scott Summers, who run the school right now. They're arguing with him. He's like, man, we got to do something about this. He's like, no, Logan, we can't. It'll look bad for mutants. He says, Scott, you're a pussy. You're way out of line, or Mr. Blah, 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 blah. He's like, whatever, man. Why don't you just go cheat on Jean Grey again? So Wolverine goes to the site of the blast, right, back in Stanford, Connecticut. He picks up a scent. He finds nitro scent. He follows it, right? He's got some tire tracks where he got on the back of the pickup truck. Of course, they're following it. Of course, the next chapter, Wolverine tracks the truck all the way to his final destination. It's in a bar. He beats up all these bar guys. They're all drunk. Apparently one guy got paid by Nitro. He's like, man, he paid cash, blah, 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 blah. And tells him where Nitro was headed at, which was out in this cabin. So he grabs a motorcycle, right? Wolverine's about to head off, but here comes Iron Man. They start talking it out, right? Iron Man's like, we're one more Stanford away from the government locking all of us up. Blah, 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 blah. Wolverine says, 2 weeks since Stanford, guys kicking back in a freaking cabin and freaking Big Sur. I have a strike team on the radio line. They just needed a location before I gave the order. Big freaking Sur, thanks. So basically, Iron Man was following him, even though he told him not to get involved just because he wanted to find out basically getting Wolverine to do his dirty work for him. And so, they go out. You got this one scene, right? You got this dude. He's surfing. These guys get pissed off of him. He beats them up. And of course, you got this couple, right? This married couple. They find him. Apparently, these guys know each other. So Wolverine decides to go with Iron Man's strike team, right? So they're sitting in this little plane thing. You got one guy looking across from him. Of course, Wolverine's just sharpening his claws, which he really doesn't have to. It's just an intimidation factor. And one guy, one shield agent, he's like, "Hey, what are you doing there, bud? Giving yourself a manicure?" "No, that's Wednesday." Being sarcastic. "Got a problem with that?" "No, no, sir." He's like, "Yeah, you better fuck off," essentially. And so you got Big Sur, California. You got Nitro. He's sitting in this little cat or cabin, also cabbage. He's sitting in this little cabin, right? Drinking, reading the newspaper. He walks outside. He's like, "Holy shit!" So this whole Shield strike team jumps out. Real sneaky. Wolverine gets down there with him. Nitro charges up, blows up his powers, right? Just to create this big explosion. You see Wolverine's getting caught in the blast. He's like, "Can't say I didn't see this coming." Good news, though. You don't feel anything. At least not after the first 500 degrees. And it just like incinerates everything on his body. Nitro pulls out a phone after the explosion. Dude says, "It's time." That cab you fellas hooked me up with? He pops out some pills, right? I might be needing another one. Apparently Nitro's been taking pills. Why, we don't know. Got some good news, though. News I just know you're going to find interesting. Looks like the shortest of the X-Men's gone the way of any flesh. Basically, he's saying like how he blew up Wolverine, he killed him, whatever. You see Wolverine's you see his adamantium skeleton, right? It's just sitting there, no flesh on it. He's like, my idea of a hat trick. You see some dude in the car, somebody he's talking to, you don't know who it is, but he's like, "Look, man, like everything we've been doing for you is a charity. You keep drawing all kinds of attention to yourself. You're fucking things up." He's like, basically, look, so you just killed supposedly a guy who's an X-Man and an Avenger. You think like that's not gonna draw some heat? He's like, "Look, man, we're done." So he just cuts off Nitro, whoever this guy is. Of course, we're going back to that one bar, going back to the biker that Wolverine talked to. And by talk to him, I mean he beat up and got the information. So you see the married couple, bald dude and blonde chick. See this black guy named Janus. And the husband says, "We really appreciate that. Really, really, we do." The wife says, "It's just that Janus doesn't like you people very much." Guy's like, "What do you mean? Blue collar guys?" "No, humans." And he just like breaks the dude's neck. So apparently by that conversation we can tell that Janus and this married couple, they're not humans. What are they? I don't know. We'll find out. It goes back to Nitro talking to the dude who basically cuts him off, says, "Yeah, we can't be doing business anymore." He's like, "What the?" Just gets decked by Wolverine. He's like, "My idea of a hat trick." You see like his flesh is still regrowing. Because even though he was basically incinerated by Nitro, you gotta realize his brain was still intact inside of his skull. Plus, his whole skeleton's coated in adamantium. So basically, his brain created a bunch of stem cells and just replicated regrow all the tissue that was incinerated. But of course, it doesn't regrow his clothes, so he's standing over Nitro naked with steam rolling off of him, much like myself after I take a nice hot shower. And so, anyways, he's just beating the hell out of Nitro. He actually slashes him a little bit, not too much, but he's just fucking him up. Kicks him, slaps him around. Of course, he figures, right, hey, this guy's hair's not on fire, his clothes are fine, and he has a cell phone on him, which means there's a certain radius where his explosion does not go off. Basically, it's like the eye of a storm. And Wolverine figures out, hey, as long as I keep this close, even if he tries to do his little explosion thing, it's not going to affect me because I'm so close to him. And so he's just beating the hell out of him. And of course, you see these three dudes, the black dude, Janus, and the married couple, and they're talking to somebody. And whoever it is, like, okay, cool, we'll just keep an eye on the situation because apparently these guys are after Nitro. He's like, after what you've, of course, Wolverine's interrogating Nitro, right? He's like, are you going to kill me? Wolverine says, after what you've done, do you think you deserve any different? But you're one of the good guys. And Wolverine says, and you've been reading the papers lately? All the good guys are working for the government now. Everybody else is just breaking the law. But to answer your question, no, I'm not going to kill you. I'm going to beat on you for a few more hours. Then I might move on to the cutting. So basically, he's going to torture him to death. Okay. And if you're no longer breathing come sunset, well, that's not my problem, is it? Of course, Nitro gets panicked, right? He's like, well, what if I give you somebody else? Another name, somebody, who was involved in all this. He's like, yeah. He's like, you ever stop to wonder how I did that? It's not like I ever had that kind of power before. Because usually Nitro can like do this explosion thing, but he took out an entire city. And he's never been that strong. He's got Wolverine's attention now. He's like, you got maybe 10 seconds. He goes, look, you know what this is? He pulls out these pills he had. It's MGH, mutant growth hormone. Even though Nitro himself is not a mutant, this does affect any kind of mutated genes, be it mutant genes, also known as the celestial seed, whether it is genes that were mutated by an external factor. Doesn't matter. Basically, it affects people's genes, makes them stronger, causes some kind of mutation, stuff like that. Okay. And so, he's like, Warren's like, you think I care about who your dealer is? I'm not a narco cop, bub. He's not my dealer. I don't pay for it. Not a dime, not a cent. This is way bigger than me, and I'm the guy who killed a town. Wolverine's thinking to himself, yeah, people would say anything in this situation, but he may have a point. He's like, hell, the guy stinks of fear. But here's the thing, he doesn't smell like he's lying. And so Wolverine's like, all right, man, give him up. Who's your guy? Who's the one that gave you these pills that allowed you to blow up all these people? And of course, the three guys, the black guy and the couple, they attack Wolverine or whatever. They start going out. They're tossing and turning. The wife's like, hey, man, like, we're not here to fight you. We're just here for Nitro. He's like, all right, cool. Don't care. You guys started this. So him and the black guy are fighting again. Wolverine's naked because, of course, he is. He's Wolverine. Nitro tries to blow himself up, but the husband guy, he, used the taser in the back of his skull. They're going at it or whatever. They're fighting back and forth because, Wolverine, loves to tussle with people. Granted, this dude started it first, but still. And so it goes back to this office building, right? And it's obviously with the dude who was giving the pills to Nitro, the mutant growth hormone, the MGH. He's talking to this dude. He's like, oh no, there's going to be fallout. He's like, it's okay. Nobody will trace it back to us. Blah, 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 blah. So clearly there's this guy, this big businessman. We don't know who he is. But clearly he's important. He's rich. He was slipping Nitro. He wasn't slipping. He was giving Nitro mutant growth hormone to make his explosions more powerful, knowing that Nitro would cause a big explosion and kill a bunch of people. Why? We don't know. But the dude's wearing a three-piece suit, so it probably has something to do with money. And of course, we go back to Wolverine. He's beating the hell out of these dudes. And Nitro thinks he got the slip on Wolverine. He just judo tosses his ass, and it's pretty good. Well, Wolverine's like, hey man, you guys are pretty strong. Like, what's strength boost, MGH, radiation? What is it? He's like, Janus. He's like, no, our strength is natural. It's like we're not even from your country or whatever. And he transforms, revealing himself to be an Atlantean. Both these people, or all three of these guys, are Atlanteans. This is because whenever Nitro blew himself up and destroyed Stanford, Connecticut, he was being chased by a team of teenage superheroes known as the New Warriors, and one of their members was Namorita. Namorita, to give you some background, she's related to King Namor, the Submariner, who is a half-human, half-Atlantean who rules Atlantis. And technically speaking, she's not his cousin. His cousin was Namora, who was also half and half. She died and she was later cloned, and the clone is Namorita. But basically, she's his cousin, more or less. His second cousin, some shit like that. And of course, Namor shows up. He's like, yes, haha, Wolverine. I sent these guys because blah, 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 blah. So, the Submariner and Wolverine, they're going at it. Wolverine puts on some pants finally, thank God. they're talking about it. He beats up James again. He stabs Namor a little bit because he's Wolverine. That's what he does. They're going back and forth. Wolverine gets knocked out, and Namor shouts "Imperious Rex," which is his catchphrase he's had since like the 40s or the 1940s. Depends on when you're watching this video. We have no idea why. It's like he was trying to start a catchphrase that just never took off. We've all known those people. So Wolverine wakes up. He's passed out. He's like, hey, I can fall anywhere until it meets the water's edge. So these Atlanteans with King Namor, they took Nitro presumably to Atlantis. Of course, Iron Man shows up. He's like, yeah, so Namor. Wolverine says, had to figure it, right? I mean, this was his cousin Nitro killed. And sleeper agents, because these other three Atlanteans, they were living normal lives, on the surface in America. Wolverine says, don't know what else to call them. They appear human, and from the looks of things, seem to know how we do things on air in the surface world. Damn, another problem. Wolverine says, not mine. Iron Man says, you wanted justice for Stanford. Nitro's getting it now in spades. Atlanteans punish criminals by taking their skin off in strips, Wolverine says, wish it were that simple. Nitro was yoked on MGH when he did Stanford. Somebody supplied it. Logan. I'm not debating this. I gave Nitro my word. That's in discussion. So what do you need me for? I can't breathe underwater. Well, because he told Nitro, hey, give me this information and I'm not going to kill you. Of course, Wolverine is a man of his word. So he's got to go get Nitro back. And of course, you see the Pacific Ocean, and it's like 100 miles below sea level. You see Iron Man, right? Iron Man's diving down because Wolverine said he can't breathe, so Iron Man goes to do it for him. He says, in yours, you hear narration by Wolverine. He didn't want to do it, of course. Didn't want to get his hands dirty. Didn't want to get involved. That is, till I pointed out that if there are 3 Atlantean sleepers, there are probably more all over the country. An infection. Yeah, that got him good and primed all right. So basically, he's saying, hey, I told Iron Man about the sleeper agents, so he got pissed off. Now he's going to Atlantis to get involved. Okay. So Iron Man shows up in Atlantis. The Submariner says, hey, man, go back. Iron Man's like, hey, we can't do this, man. I need Nitro back. He says, Wolverine made clear his intent to grant Nitro asylum. Iron Man says, asylum, not immunity. And not for free either. He has information to trade. The name of the idiots who set him loose on Stanford. Fine, I'll kill them too. Wish it were that simple. A bargain was struck. You may not like it, but there it is. A bargain where a mass murderer's life is spared, by Wolverine no less. Funny, I'd expected him to have less mercy. Just as I expected you to have more sense. Really, I thought you were keeping your Wolverine on a tighter leash. Iron Man says, so, that's a no. Don't posture. Any attempt to take Nitro by force will never work. So if you want to persuade me. Why should I release the murder of my cousin to the tender mercies of surface world justice? Give me one good reason. I'll do better than that. I'll give you 6. Pops all 6 of his claws out. Turns out it's not Iron Man. It's Wolverine using Iron Man's scuba armor. Oh my god, look at that. He's so clever. Namor, he's 6, James on him. He gets just beat the hell out of course. So the Submariner and Wolverine inside of Iron Man's armor fighting. The blonde chick, now in her Atlantean form, sneaks up on him. He grabs her. He says, look, man, I'll kill this bitch. Alright, I'll kill her. Namor's like, why? Why is the murderer worth your word? Not Iron Man, sorry. Wolverine says he's not. But it doesn't change the fact it's still my word. Even for a surface dweller, even for a superhero, your stupidity is outstripped only by your arrogance. Gee, that really hurts my feelings. You're a killer. But because you keep your word to another killer, you have your honor. You come to my realm, threaten my people, but you have your honor. You would keep me from the vengeance that is rightfully mine, but you have your honor. Your honor is at best hypocrisy, at worst a delusion. Nitro's got information I want. You should want it too, for the same reason as me. We're getting all, and the blonde chick, she's like, we're already getting it, you idiot. My husband, Politis, yeah, is extracting it right now. Wolverine thinks, damn, take me to him. Right now, subby. So they go, to this little torture chamber. The chick's like, oh my god, no. And it's like, Wolverine says, I got a lot of reputations, like being right most of the time. And so, apparently, this guy was torturing Nitro, but Nitro broke out and killed this dude. She's like, oh my god, Politos! Or whatever. And, of course, he was actually able to get the information. Apparently, the business guy we see earlier who gave Nitro the MHG, or no, MGH, yeah, mutant growth hormone, says his name is Walter Duncan. The chick's about to kill him or whatever. Wolverine's like, nah, look, I need him. Nitro tries to hit these people like some kind of fucking Atlantean weapon, and Wolverine cuts his hand off because that's what he does. He's like, no more bargains, no more reprieves, no more fucking victims. But you said you gave your word. He goes, the words echo in my head, daring me, damning me, my claws, inches from his jugular. A flick and it's all over. But no, it ain't my place to kill you. It's theirs. My guess, you'll be soon wishing I did kill you. Probably be the only thing we ever have in common. Of course, he's like, yeah, I'm just going to leave you here. I got my information. Sometime later, Wolverine's back in America, right? He's in a bar. Here comes the Submariner. Wolverine, you come here to give me Nitro's ashes? For the foreseeable future, he'll be staying in New Pangea as our guest. Quite a show of restraint. Much like yours, no? Wasn't restraint. Just realized you were right. I was being arrogant. You tell anybody I said that, I'll gut you like a fish, so to speak. Before Nitro escaped, Politis extracted the information you were looking for. Too bad Politis took it with him to his grave. Not entirely. His dying words to Amir revealed the identity of Nitro's benefactors, an individual named Walter Duncan. Or Walter DeClun, sorry. I know the man from my days in corporate America. An Atlantean. He would be called a Pishash. The word doesn't translate easily into English, but it roughly means an immoral person. My sources tell me that these days he's the CEO of Damage Control Incorporated. Okay, two important things here. Namor said, his days in corporate America. Well, after World War II, he was kind of free-floating. The Kingdom of Atlantis was in shambles or whatever, and he basically kind of went crazy a bit, but then he actually got reestablished on the surface world in America and became a businessman for a while before he was able to retake his throne and become King Namor instead of Prince Namor. As far as Damage Control, basically, okay, so anytime you have like these big superhero, supervillain fights, there's always like buildings getting blown up and stuff like that. Well, Damage Control is a private contractor. Basically, there's a big mess, Damage Control gets called in, and they get paid to fix it up. I actually think they had their own comic book for a limited time way back in the day. But for those of you who watch the movies, if you watch Spider-Man Homecoming, there's a flashback that takes place during the Avengers movie, right? You see Michael Keaton, his character, Adrian Toomes, he and his buddies are like cleaning up a mess because they got contracted to clean it up. But then a lady comes in and says, no, you guys lost the contract. We've been contracted. And I think they call them, yeah, they actually mention it by name. It's called Damage Control. The group that kicks out Adrian Toomes in that movie and says, hey, we're going to clean up this mess or whatever, and that's why he lost his job and he's falling on hard times, that is Damage Control. Basically, they got contracted, which it was a nice, fun way to introduce Damage Control into the MCU, at least in my opinion. Of of course, they're not a group that has like a big spotlight, so there's not much you can do with them. Alright, so Wolverine's got the information. So basically, he's like breaking into places. Basically, he's like going to take down damage control, or at least he's going to go after Walker Declan. And so he's going to damage control, right? And he's like, hey, I need to see this dude. Secretary's like, yeah, man, you're going to come back because I'm not giving you any kind of interview. You didn't set up a meeting or whatever. And she's like, look, man, I was the person who told the Punisher he had to get... Oh, sorry, I screwed that up a bit. She said, yeah, man, look. Yeah, remember, I'm the person who told the Punisher that he's going to have to get a meeting. Wolverine says, do I look like the Punisher to you? So basically, he ends up seeing somebody, and it's this chick, right? And she says her name is Anne-Marie Hogue. She's the president of Damage Control, where Declan's the CEO. And, she's like, what's this all about? Wolverine's like, hey, look, your buddy, he's crooked as hell. He was giving Nitro this MGH, right? Allowed himself to blow up super big. And, yeah, since you guys basically head this company, because what I'm thinking is, right, he gave Nitro these drugs. Nitro blew himself up a whole bunch. Nitro killed a bunch of people so that you guys could come in and clean this place up and, get a bunch of money. So, you may be in a shit ton of trouble. Gosh, the dude comes on and he's like, hey, stop talking right now. Blah, 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 blah. You're trespassing. And, oh, look at me. I got a suit and I'm going to call the cops on you and I'm going to blah, 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 blah. Or it's like, yeah, whatever, man. Anyways, I'm going to have a ball taking your ass down. So he plants a little device, right? And he's sneaking around this building at this point. He's planting all kinds of devices. And you see he's in Dallas, Texas now, right? He's with Forge. Now, Forge is an X-Man, much like Wolverine. Forge has the mutant ability to basically, he just knows machines. Like, if you say, hey, Forge, I need you to build me a supercomputer that can fly me to the moon, jack me off, and make me a smoothie, he can build it. Now, he can tell you what it is, what it does, but he can't tell you exactly how it works. It's this weird caveat for his power. And so basically he gave Wolverine these data miners, and essentially, and that's how Wolverine finds out, okay, all these different superhero battles, especially since the Civil War popped off, Damage Control's been eating up these contracts and making a shit ton of money. So basically, this whole thing was set off because Declan wants to make a bunch of money with his company. And so Wolverine starts going to like all their places. He destroys their equipment. He goes to the Cayman Islands to attack their finances. He goes back to the X Mansion, and you got Emma there and Scott. They're like, hey, we told you not to blah 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 blah. And it's like, now what do you have to say for yourself? Wolverine's like, Emma, does Scott know you used to team up with Iron Man, so to speak? Basically saying her and Tony Stark were doing the business at one point. You look stunned, sweetheart. Don't you remember when Rogue swiped your powers at one time? She takes a gal's memories while she's at it. And speaking of memories, yeah, I remember you two telling me to back off. Just like I remember giving precise anatomical directions for where you can stick your orders. Basically, he told them to shove it up their ass. And if I'd listened, not only would Nitro still be at large, but nobody ever would have known about Damage Control's war profiteering. And all on account of you being scared. Scared of offending the humans, scared of getting in the middle, of getting involved. Which is why, since I thought playing dress up in the spandex was all about us getting involved. He's basically saying, hey, we're superheroes. We're supposed to get involved. It's kind of our job. You ask me your decisions, your order. They'd have Jean spinning in her grave. That is, if she stayed in it for more than 5 minutes. And so you go back to Declan and his little assistants. They're just discussing business things, but it turns out like Wolverine is attacking all their stuff. He's attacking their finances. He's attacking all their little shareholders, all this. So basically, he's like bullying shareholders into selling off their stocks, basically plummeting the company's worth, forcing them into bankruptcy essentially. So he breaks in this one place, right? And it's this little thing that Declan bought recently, and obviously he bought it as a trap because he knows what Wolverine's doing. He's like attacking the finances. So Wolverine goes in there knowing it's a trap, and you see these dudes, these guards, and they've got like Mandroid armor. Mandroid armor, okay, it's Shield developed the Mandroid armor with Stark Tech back when Tony Stark was still like making tech for Shield before he got out of the contract and all the weapons business, right? And of course, these guys like aren't working for Shield. They just found this at like battle sites or whatever, scrapped it back together. And so Wolverine's just tearing these dudes apart. And they're trying to like cut into Wolverine's neck with like a saw blade or whatever. They're gonna cut his head off. And of course, the blade isn't working because the blade's adamantium, but so is Wolverine's skeleton, so they can't cut his head off. But Wolverine just like beats the hell out of these dudes. Well, here come the Atlanteans. You got Janus, you got the blonde chick. Okay, I would say the husband's dead, but Janus and the blonde chick, Wolverine's like, yeah, I knew this was a trap, which is why I have these guys waiting for me, because, while I can easily take these losers out, it's always nice to have, especially since we've been working together with this whole thing anyways. Well, here comes some S.H.I.E.L.D. agents. They bust in. You got the Sentry. The Sentry's like this wickedly powerful dude, and he's also, schizophrenic and crazy. And the Sentry's like, oh, I gotta take you in because that's the right thing to do, and you're just causing problems. Well, the Sentry gets the better of him, beats him up. Wolverine wakes up on the helicarrier, right? And he's facing Maria Hill. Maria Hill, at the time, was the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. And she's like, yeah, we couldn't do much for the Atlanteans. They have diplomatic immunity, so we just sent them home. You, however, do not have that. He's like, and let's see. She's like, I can't say I'm surprised to see you come down against registration, Logan. He's like trying to imagine my disappointment. Not for nothing, but the only thing I was coming down against as a scumbag war profiteer. This would be Walter D. Clun, CEO of Damage Control Inc., a member of the board of the New York Stock Exchange, and a friend of the sitting president. Basically, this dude has his fingers in a bunch of pies, and so they don't want to do anything to him because, he moves a lot of money around. Typical American corruption, right? He's pressing federal charges. I'm not sure the Registration Act is your biggest concern. Wolverine says, you were paying attention to the war profiteer part, right? She's like, Declan's protected. There's nothing you can do about him, and there's nothing I can do about him. And that's even if I was inclined, which I'm not. I've got enough on my plate as it is. He's like, yeah, fascism's full time-consuming from what I've heard. She's like, it's almost funny how quick some people are to label sensible legislation as fascism. So trading liberty for safety, what's passing for sensible these days? Because I seem to think the motto of America, and I'm Canadian, so that might be why I'm confused, used to be give me liberty or give me death. And Wolverine's not wrong in his sentiment because, again, it goes back to the whole, well, we're going to pass a bunch of laws or whatever to keep people safe, quote unquote, but it's slowly stripping people of their rights. And even back then, when this book was written, it was pretty obvious that America is moving to a fascism. It is moving to a police state, which is why we get the whole, there used to be another saying in America, and that is, while I disagree with what you say, I will defend to the death your right to say it. Of course, nowadays is, freedom, 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 unless you express your freedom in a way I don't like, in which case you shouldn't have that freedom anymore. A little food for thought there. And she's basically like giving Wolverine the 10th degree. She says, are all Canadians this judgmental when it comes to America? Pretty much. In that case, you got two choices. Play ball and get immunity for your past actions, or spend the rest of your natural life, which, given your delayed aging, is interminable, in shackles. Or I could slice through those same shackles, grab your sidearm, and shoot my way out of here. I hate to be the one to tell you this, Houdini, but that'd be a neat trick, seeing as how that collar you're wearing isn't a fashion statement. It's a level 10 power nullifier. Wolverine, which is so dumb when you really think about it, and which is what Wolverine's about to explain, yeah, that's a mistake most people make. What is? To think just because my claws are the result of a genetic mutation that they're a superpower. They're physically part of his body. Like you can't. It's not like he produces energy blasts or anything like that. It's not like he teleports. They are it's like an arm or a leg to him. You can't turn them off. And so he slices through the cuffs. He grabs her gun. He shoots the fucking windows out. He jumps out. He's like, this might hurt a bit. He's like, actually, it'll hurt more than that if I can't get this collar off. Collar might not affect the claws, but it sure zeroes out the healing factor. And I have a feeling I might be needing it. Because realize he's on the helicarrier. The helicarrier is miles and miles above the ground. So he's just free falling. He'll survive because of his ability to heal and, his adamantium skeleton. But if his healing factor does not work because of that collar, he's fucked. So he's slicing through it like no other. And of course, you go back to damage control, you got the CEO, or the president's arguing with Declan, who's the CEO. And she's like, look, man, you're causing problems. This is bullshit. He's like, well, I've improved profit margins and blah, 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 blah. And she's like, yeah, well, we dug up all your dirty fucking shit, so you're pretty much done. What she's like, he's like, we're gonna, get you out of this company. He says, temporarily. The only way you'll remove me as CEO is over my cold, dead body. Wolverine's like, oh, please. Can I? And of course, all the board members that are supporting Declan, they book out of there. He's like, yeah, loyal. He goes, they're probably running to find a policeman. So if your plan is to murder me in cold blood, I suggest you do it quick. It wouldn't be murder. It'd be retribution. And it wouldn't be in cold blood. That's for damn sure. And the very last thing I dream of is doing it quick. And so the dude's like, or Declan, right? He says, in that case, you might recognize it. It's mutant growth hormone you took off Nitro. I also took off his right hand. You get better. This dude pops these pills. Basically, he gets like a little bit of super strength and some endurance. He's like, oh, I'll get my hands dirty. I'm going to gnaw your still beating heart, you freaking mutation. Basically, this dude knows the jig's up, so he's just like popping steroids. He charges at Wolverine. They bust out the window, fall to the street below. And Wolverine's musing to himself, right? He's like, so that's how it ended. I'm not really sure it could have ended any other way. I mean, yeah, there might be people, or people another way, a better way. But this is how I deal with things. How I dealt with them. How I've always dealt with them. And nobody knows this better than me, if you got a rabid dog, you gotta put it down. Simple as that. And Declan, that's what he was. A rabid dog. No, he wasn't. Don't let him off the hook. Oh, okay, yeah. She's like, apparently, because you'll notice, Wolverine's box in the book, it's a little bit yellow to the side. But there's another person responding now, because at first we thought this whole narration was just Wolverine musing to himself as the story goes on. But apparently he has been talking to somebody through the story. So this other person says, no, he wasn't. Don't let him off like that. Make those excuses for him. He was evil. Wolverine replies, maybe. But if he was, it's not evil. But if he was, it was not evil. It's not evil the way we've come to think of it. We're used to seeing evil as conscious, as thoughtful. Here's the bad guy with his diabolical master plan that he thought through. Thought through and through enough so he knew all the reasons it was wrong, considered, and at the end of the day, just didn't care. Of course, he ends up kicking Declan in the balls, which is just hilarious. And of course, the next panel you see, it's at Stanford Connecticut. It's the rebel, really. Of course, it's going back and forth between that and the fight with Declan. But that's not what evil looks like. See, evil doesn't think; it just acts. The bad guys don't weigh pros and cons or make excuses to their conscience. They just do what they want to do. They just act on instinct. Like that rabid dog. And then you see, he's just giving it to Declan. He's just knocking his ass all around. And you see Wolverine talking to this woman, which is who he's been narrating the story to. least that's what I tell myself. Those rare times I've had too much to drink or something. And I find myself regretting the stuff I've done in my life. And of course, Wolverine has his left and his right claw popped out, but not his middle claw. And he's aiming right towards this dude's eyes. And this woman says, "And do you regret it? What you've done since this?" And it goes right through the dude's head, killing him. Maybe I should, but no, Miriam. No, I don't. And so basically, we find out that this whole story was not Wolverine thinking to himself as it goes along. He was with Miriam. Miriam, her son was one of the 60 kids that were killed in Stanford, and she really pushed hard for registration and backed this Registration Act. I'm kind of surprised they didn't make her a bigger character after the whole Civil War event, but maybe it's just one of those things that got lost in the laundry. But basically, this whole point of the story was Wolverine telling Miriam, hey, here's why Nitro blew up Stanford. Here's why he was able to kill your son and all these other kids. It's because this scumbag from corporate America was feeding him drugs in the hope to make money off this whole thing. Essentially, your son, along with all these other people, their lives are traded for a little bit of money. Which more or less is good commentary on how American business and politics can become intertwined and become corrupted. And of course, this is a little bit of an epilogue. And of course, Wolverine's thinking about like the previous events in the book. Of course, he's always thinking about like how he's suffered trauma through his life or whatever. When he first got his powers as a young man, the Weapon X program. There's the time that Magneto had actually ripped all the adamantium out of his skeleton during Fatal Attractions, and how like it seems like there's always some mysterious person in the background or whatever. Always someone who's always pulling the strings. And of course, he thinks back to Jean Grey, how they had this big love affair going on, or kind of love affair. She never really got with him. He's just looking around, right? And we actually see a little part after Nitro leaves. This is back whenever Nitro blew himself up and seemingly vaporized Wolverine. And you see like all that's left in his body is his brain and his part of his eyes, and like that's where all the tissue starts regrowing from. And it's fucking crazy. The artwork's good on it, to be honest, but he's going back through this whole adventure. But then it actually concludes whenever he fell from the helicarrier. He got the collar off, right? The power dampening collar that would had shut off his healing factor. So he cut it off and he hit the street. And of course, he legally died, but he regenerated, right? He healed. But basically, what Wolverine is showing us is that if his injuries are severe enough, even though his body will heal, he still, if they're severe enough, will die. He will legally die until his body heals. His heart will stop, and in that time frame, his soul actually leaves his body. And apparently, every time it does, he says he's there. He's always there, trying to kill me, to pull me into the abyss. Not that I blame him. After all, I'm the one who killed him. Lazare. Of course, we don't really know who Lazare is at this time. This is payback, his vendetta. Used to be, I'd show up here in this purgatory. He wouldn't be here. We wouldn't fight like this. But lately, he's been here waiting for me more and more. And we do this. And if he wins, I die. I win, I go back. Except that's not as good as it sounds, because winning means never going into that light. And never going there means never seeing any of them. All of my love. And never going there never means seeing any of them. All of my loves. And he's talking about Jean Grey, his first wife in Japan, the one chick he almost married that one time, but that all got messed up by God, who the hell was that? Mastermind. He goes, all life, even when I win, I lose. That's sad. Of course, he wakes up from this dream or whatever he was having, and turns out the blonde chick, the Atlantean, like, I guess they're hooked up now, they're lovers or whatever, so they're doing the business. And yeah, I guess, he's just thinking about, all the stuff he's done, in the past or whatever. He's banging this dead dude's wife because, whatever. That's Wolverine. But anyways, that's Wolverine's story within the Civil War event. At some point, we'll cover the actual Civil War proper. But it's an interesting little side story. Kind of shows, what Wolverine was up to. Rather than him just like palling around with people, he was actually like on a mission, wanted to get shit done when everyone else was playing politics and being giant pussies. But yeah, good story. I mean, if you like the Civil War story, I would highly recommend picking it up. Nice little companion piece. Kind of expands the whole time period. But yeah, or if you're just a Wolverine fan in general, really good book. Anyways, this has been Mangata Americana, and until next time, true believers, later.